Is your business protected against the threat of malicious litigation and frivolous lawsuits? Are you sinking company profits into marketing campaigns that do nothing to contribute to the growth of your business? Bottled Business Sense provides practical business perspectives that uniquely emphasize both legal and media marketing strategies to protect and ensure the longevity of your business. And whether you're trying to provide a startup business with some level of stability or an established business with foolproof asset and estate protection, or simply attempting to get a better return for your business marketing dollars, Bill Bernard and Rick Moscoso will expose potential pitfalls to ensure the security and growth of your business, free from unwanted expense and the threat of litigation. You'll learn how to implement marketing and protection tools equal to those used by today's most successful corporations. Let's join Bill and Rick for today's Bottled Business Sense show.
Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday here at 10 o'clock Pacific time here at the Bottled Business Sense show. I'm Rick Moscoso, one of your co-hosts, broadcasting from beautiful central Wisconsin. And on the other side is my other co-host, Bill Bernard. But before we bring Bill on, just wanted to welcome all of our returning viewers and listeners.
Yeah, I don't know about that beautiful part, Rick. You better have a disclaimer for that.
Hey, I grew up here, so it's beautiful. So, in any event, welcome to all our returning viewers and new viewers and listeners out there. We are the Bottled Business Sense show and broadcast in simulcast and also in audio form. Right here on the website or at blogtalkradio.com/Bottled Business Sense show. And we have been broadcasting for some time now and really all meant to communicate best practices for your business to make sure it's profitable, running safely, you're set up right, and run it efficiently. And, the tips and tricks and best practices that we talk about on the show weekly, just really meant to help the small business owner. And, the beautiful thing about it is it's all free. And, Bill and I both have a passion as business entrepreneurs to share our success stories with you and other people's success stories with you so we can have fun in what we're doing, enjoy what we're doing, and most of all, be profitable. So with that, also, you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, at the Bottled Business Sense show. So reach out to us anytime you want. If you want to hear a topic or if you have any questions or even want to be a guest on the Bottled Business Sense show, reach out to us on email at bottledbusinesssenseshow@gmail.com. So with that, I want to welcome Bill to share some screen time here with me, and he is in our Southern California studio. Welcome to the Bottled Business Sense show, Bill.
Hey, well, it's a weekly thing here, Rick, and as you said, we do it for nothing other than to help out the community and to make sure that they have some free tips that they might be able to act upon. Remember, when you listen to us, of course, anything that we tell you would have to be reviewed by, especially with legal issues, reviewed by an attorney of your choice to make sure your particular situation is analyzed and that the general principles that we discuss are applied to your specific scenario. But make sure that you act upon these things. We can only give you this information and provide it as a tool, but it's up to you ultimately to act upon the information. And that kind of falls in line with what our show is about today. I've kind of named this show Business Mistakes that Increase Your Legal Risk. And there are a number of them, some of which we've touched on before, but they're worth reminding everyone about. And when taken in conjunction with each other, I think you'll see today that these tips are really asking you to take action. Take action on some of the things you need to do to make sure your business is not only prosperous but safe, because you're not going to be prosperous unless your business is safe. You can't have a prosperous business no matter how much you market unless you have a legally protected business, unless you're safe and insulated from the dangers that could destroy your business. And let's face it, the same principles could destroy your business, whether it's profitable or unprofitable. So you got to put the cart before the horse, and make sure you take action on some of these things. And the first one, Rick, we talked about before, is using the correct legal entity. Now, you notice I didn't say today, emphasize, like our first show, I think one of our first shows talked about, I didn't say, hey, get an entity. I said, use the correct entity. So I'm presupposing at this stage of the game that our viewers and listeners know you have to have an entity, or should have an entity. And so now I'm basically saying, make sure you use the right one. Get a lawyer, because let's face it, some people refer to sole proprietorships, solopreneurships, partnerships as an entity, and I'm talking about a formalized entity. Now, you can get a formal agreement and you can make a partnership out of it, but partnerships are many times established by operation of law, whether you have agreed to officially establish a partnership or not. Based on the way you're conducting business with someone, it could be deemed a partnership. But either way, partnership or sole proprietorship, you are all going to be liable for whatever comes your way, versus with a formalized entity, you at least protect your personal assets. And I think, Rick, it's beneficial to mention, again, the distinction. When you have an entity, it doesn't mean you shouldn't have insurance. Get this question all the time. A formalized entity will protect your personal assets, your car, your home, your accounts, that sort of thing. Insurance protects your business assets. So if a claim is made against your business, which has a formalized business entity, now you pay the deductible and the insurance pays the rest of the claim. Otherwise, even though your personal assets are protected, if you don't have liability insurance, they could come after your business and whatever assets the business owns to satisfy the judgment. So the first prong of this whole thing is to make sure you have the right entity, and to make sure that you have insurance as well. And remember that there are all kinds of tax ramifications, which I would urge you to see a CPA about, that also come into play when you are not formalized versus having a formalized entity. So that's the first one.
Yeah, and I think that's a good distinction that you just made, because that is a common mistake or misnomer that a lot of new business owners, new entrepreneurs make. And, if you want clarification on this, just go to the bottledbusinesssenseshow.com website. We specifically spoke on different entities that are available for your business, as well as business insurance. We just spoke about that recently, right, Bill?
Yes, we did. Yep, absolutely. We have a whole show, I think, on the distinction between insurance and entity protection. Another important one, ladies and gentlemen, would be forming your entity in another state. Everybody talks about Delaware and Nevada, and look, I'm not saying under the appropriate circumstances they may not be beneficial, but I would structure your entity in the place that you're going to do business. If you're in California and you're doing business in California, and you have an entity in another state, you could be taxed in California by the Franchise Tax Board if you have something as minute as a California bank account. Because what do you want to do? You want to go to another state just to do your banking? You're probably going to open a California account, and that could be considered doing business. Moreover, what's the real important point I'm trying to drive home here? Many people get these entities formalized in other states because they want to be anonymous. I've said time and time again, if you are properly protected by way of asset protection principles, you don't need to be anonymous. You don't need to be undiscoverable as long as you protect yourself in the proper way, and that's utilizing asset protection principles in the manner that they're supposed to be used.
So why is that then that people make that mistake, or that, again, I guess that would be another myth. Why would they proceed with the intention of being anonymous?
Well, certain states have charging order protections, and by the way, you could look up the charging order protection show I think we did that talks about Nevada's charging protection order. There are certain benefits that some of these states have that other states don't, Rick. And in answer to your question as well, I think I just mentioned some people feel that it's going to be harder to discover them if they're incorporated in some other state. But those are things that you have to discuss with your attorney based on the nature and size of your business, the amount of assets involved. For example, you might be doing a business that has a high probability of being sued, has more exposure than another type of business. You might want charging order protection that, for example, Nevada offers. But all I'm trying to say is for the general solopreneur out there who wants to establish an entity, or who might have anywhere between 1 to 50 employees, it isn't necessarily a given that incorporating in another state is going to be more beneficial to you. It has to be discussed with an attorney, and that brings up this other important issue. Make sure you discuss everything you're going to do with an attorney. It's becoming commonplace today to have a CPA or a tax professional draft legal documents, a financial advisor. When a business entity has been drafted with the minimum amount of paperwork, it provides very little legal protection and really no tax benefits. So make sure you resolve this problem by getting in touch with an attorney who practices asset protection. Don't take the shortcut method of cutting corners when you're putting your documentation together for your business entity. That would be a really important one to make sure you take a look at. And also, don't put your business entities under one roof. If you have multiple businesses and they're different types of businesses, don't put them under the same business structure. Spread them out. Spread your liability protection out. You might have an LLC for one business. You might have an S corporation for another business. You might be able to structure those businesses in such a way that they all come under the umbrella of a C corporation, which could be a holding company or could be a general company for purposes of holding the other two companies in place. Otherwise, you might want to have separate companies because the nature of the business is so separate that one lawsuit on one type of a business may not necessarily involve the other type of business unless they're under the umbrella of the same company, the same corporate structure. So there are various ways to do this depending on the nature of your business and what you're trying to accomplish, wherein structuring businesses under one general entity may be beneficial in one circumstance, but not beneficial in others.
So if you're mixing businesses in one basket, then and you had a claim come against you in business A, would they be able to reach into the assets of B and C?
Well, it depends. If the major, let's say you have a C corporation that controls two LLCs and one of the LLCs is sued. If the C corporation is generating profits from the business of the LLC, they could be included in a lawsuit, for example, as being someone who is participating in and also having the general scope of authority over the LLC. If you have that LLC on its own, you could potentially escape that situation. Especially if that LLC is conducting business of a different nature than the C corporation would be conducting. So all of these things have to be measured and decided upon. What's going to be most beneficial for me to have one corporate structure because I'm trying to accomplish the goal of diversifying my assets, but the business is generally the same. It might be a little bit diversified under different levels of the entity protection that I'm devising. Or are these separate businesses totally, whereby the entities should be separate because they are totally diversified, and therefore I'm trying to insulate them from any lawsuit that comes down the pike. All discussions. I mean, I think this emphasizes very heartily why you should have discussions with an attorney. You know, this is not something you're going to find online and be able to do yourself.
Right. Again, especially in complex situations like you just kind of you use as an example.
Sure.
Go to a guy like Bill to get clarity on what the best thing is to do for your particular business.
Another big one, inadequate capitalization. If you have too many bills and your company is sinking, you can be found to be personally liable on debts. A lot of times you'll see a fraud take place whereby a company that is in debt forms a new company and transfers these assets that the old company has into the new company in order to avoid the debts of the old company. Boy, a judge will break that down pretty quick and hold you personally liable, not to mention the fact that the company, the original older company, could be found to be defunct in and of itself and just a shell corporation because you haven't adequately capitalized it. You knew that, and you let it go to waste, and now you're going to be held personally liable, and now your personal assets will be put at risk. So an entity should not be incurring liabilities in a company which it cannot reasonably repay its debts. Okay? So judges aren't stupid, folks. Remember that. Judges aren't stupid. They'll find out, they'll break this down, and if there's a lawsuit against you, this inadequate capitalization could be a death knell for you. We've covered about 5 so far. Number 6 is going to be really important. That's commingling assets, and we've talked about this in another show. Not only commingling personal assets with business assets, but commingling different entity assets should you have different entities that aren't under the same umbrella. An asset of the entity, for example, a company car, should not be used for personal activities and should not be used for a different entity's business without proper documentation. What does that mean? Well, if you're going to use a business's entity for something other than the business itself, why not draw up a lease? Make it nice, clean, and legal and say, this is a lease whereby Company B can borrow Company A's car for certain conditions, or Joe Blow or Rick Moscoso can borrow Company A's cars to do X, Y, and Z, and then you have a lease whereby you pay the company for using that car. Now you've got a clear what? Paper trail, right? That shows that you're doing business in the manner that you should. Don't commingle assets. And of course, what's the other one we always talked about, Rick? A failure to maintain corporate records and minutes. If you do this, a company is going to be held to be a shell corporation. You're going to be found to be just a phony baloney kind of organization. This is particularly true with S corporations and C corporations. With an LLC, you don't have to have these annual meetings, but I always indicate to people you should hold those meetings just to show that everything is on the up and up. I mean, I would do it because what's the big deal of having a meeting once a year, you know? So before I go on to the last 3, let me recap what we've covered so far because I think it's important. Using the correct legal entity. Number 2, forming your entity in another state. Consider whether you want to do that. Number 3, putting multiple businesses under one entity. That could be a potential problem. Number 4, cutting corners with entity documentation by not having a lawyer draw it up. Number 5, inadequate capitalization. Number 6, commingling assets between personal and business entities or between 2 business entities. And number 7, failing to maintain your corporate records and minutes. Number 8 is holding yourself out as an individual doing business rather than as your entity. If you sign documentation, Rick Moscoso, Captivate 365 LLC, right, Rick?
Right.
You're never going to sign a contract that you enter into, Rick Moscoso. You're going to sign it, Rick Moscoso, managing member, Captivate 365 LLC. Because if you sign it under your personal name, you are in effect giving a personal guarantee on that business contract, and now your personal assets could be exposed should a lawsuit come your way. So you have to make sure that you enter into obligations by way of the name of your business entity, and that includes business cards, stationery, websites, oral statements to customers. Hey, I'm Rick Moscoso, the managing member of Captivate 365 LLC, and I'm here to offer you blah, blah, blah. Now, when you answer a phone, you can say Rick Moscoso. You don't have to say that whole, rigmarole when you answer a phone. But if you're making some sort of a business offering, I would make sure that that sort of stuff is really meticulously adhered to. Number 9, diversion or concentration of assets in one entity and liabilities in another. This a lot of times comes into play when you have real estate investing. For an LLC, for example, You don't want to hold all of your investment properties. And let's say you have investment businesses. Let's say you own business properties. You have one business that owns multiple properties. You might want to hold properties in different LLCs, especially if you're a real estate investor, because that way, if you're sued, you're only exposed to the value of that particular LLC. If you have 10 properties in an LLC, those 10 properties are going to be worth a lot more than one or two properties, right? Typically speaking. Mm-hmm. And you want to make sure that whatever property is held in that business entity is in the name of that business entity. So any business entity owned by Captivate 365 LLC better be in the name of Captivate 365 LLC and not kept in the name of Rick Moscoso.
Would it be practical then, like in your example of being a real estate investor, would it be practical to have an entity for each investment property so it stands on its own?
To be very candid with you, Rick, I would urge people to do that. And if you're working with a lawyer who is going to work with you on that basis, he or she's probably going to give you a discount in terms of establishing each LLC. Sometimes I've talked to clients where they say, I want to keep 2 or 3 in the LLC. They're in the same general area. I'm going to take the risk. I've got a lot of properties. 2 or 3 is good for me. But yeah, if you want to have the maximum benefit, then I would say, yeah, 1 property per LLC, if that's something you can afford, and if you can work with an attorney who's able to meet your accommodations. And then the final one is not holding assets in the name of the corporation or LLC. If you want the corporate veil to protect you when you own rental properties, make sure that the entity is on title to on the LLC. And I think we just mentioned that, so maybe we had already covered that. I think the final one I want to bring to everybody's attention, Rick, is the final one is don't do nothing. Okay, if your business is growing, maybe faster than you expect, this is a great problem to have, man. This is a great problem. You have to properly structure your business to be legally protected. You have to take into consideration all of the potential ramifications of not taking action, because why do we want to take action? Because we want to keep you off the courthouse steps, right? Remember, this is a habit that you develop. It's a way of doing business to allow your business to prosper. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, then you have only you to blame for your business failing to prosper. You cannot market, you cannot prosper in your everyday business unless your business is structured to where you feel safe and confident in its everyday operation. And so I think that's what we tried to call home today, Rick, and why we tried to talk about diversifying the concentration of your assets in different entities, why you should have assets held in the corporate structure or LLC structure rather than your own, why you should never personally guarantee a contract. All of these things from A to Z are points that if you take them to heart, you're going to be much better off in the long run. So hopefully that's been helpful today.
Yeah, I know from personal experience, Bill helped me reorganize and form an LLC for Captivate 365. And, along the way, I can say this, not just because Bill's my co-host or a trusted friend of mine, but he did educate, Bill did a great job educating me on a lot of these things that we just touched on in detail, because, I would have no clue or even suspect any of these things that would put me in a position to expose my business or expose myself, my personal assets. And so, take heed to Bill's advice here on the show, because, if you do have a business that's running a significant amount of profit, or maybe it's at high risk or something like that, it's worth the time to sit down with an attorney and just figure everything out, so you make sure that you and your business is fully protected, so you can do what you're passionate about doing, right?
Right, exactly right. And by the way, I might mention that one of my websites, my estate planning portion of my business is Protect Your Estate 365. Rick just shot a bunch of new videos for Protect 365. ProtectYourEstate365.com, which is coming out here shortly. Please make note of that website for all of your estate planning needs, but also take a look at Rick's work. Obviously, I had no clue as to how good videos can be until I did my initial videos with Rick several years back. But these are brand new videos. Take a look at them when they're up. And we'll let you know when the site is officially up and running. It's up and running now, but the revised site is not up and running. And when it is, take a look at Rick's videos, because if you want to promote your company, I wholeheartedly recommend that route for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for joining us again in this episode of Bottle Business Sense Show. Please reach out to Bill. All of his contact information is below this video here. And reach out to him if you have any questions, any concerns, or just want to bounce some ideas off of him. He's always available, and we'll definitely take your call. In fact, Bill, if you want to share a couple of your phone numbers, that would be great as well.
Yeah, the 949 area code for both. Direct line 413-6535 and office number 698-6222. So until next week, we'll see you all again, same time, same place, and have a prosperous and safe week, everybody, in your business.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next week.